Thank you, Dr. Federley. That was so beautiful and relaxing and deepening. I am deeply appreciative for that musical piece as we begin our time together. Thank you, Josh, for so warmly introducing our service and welcoming us all. And Mignon, thank you for introducing that music. I must confess that that particular hymn is one of my favorites. Very, very beautiful. As we light our chalice flame this morning, I share with you these words from George Howard. A life becomes meaningful when one sees him or herself as an actor within the context of a story. I have defined in a very limited and partial way faith development as a process of cultivating compassion, empathy, gratitude, and peace. It is called faith development to cultivate these characteristics because we have to trust that we are capable of being so dedicated and cultivating these qualities. And we must have faith or trust that we are capable of doing it. And we must have faith that it is worthwhile to do so. Faith development, however, is not nurtured by abstract concepts. But faith development is encouraged by stories. Stories are powerful because we are emotional, relational, instinctual, and body-based beings. The airy heights of thought do not touch us as deeply as these well springs. We are made of blood and bone and flesh, not the airy heights of thought. Our thinking capacity evolved long after our emotions and our instincts. But magic can happen if something moves our emotional, physical, and thinking capabilities. Stories can do that. But something else makes a story powerful. If someone knows us really well, they know our story. And our story, our individual story, is wrapped up and intertwined with our family story. And our family story goes back in a very long story of the generations of our family, far back into the mist of time. And all of these stories are wrapped within the story of civilization and of religion and of the growth of humanity itself. We are particularly drawn to stories that help make sense of our lives, that help us deal with perennial challenges and give us insight and direction, maybe even provide some revelation. In a few moments, I will explore the importance of stories for faith development. Pam, I love that story. That was beautiful, and I love the crown. I must get one of those for myself, by the way. In the 1970s, a UU minister serving part-time in a congregation in the Pacific Northwest would show up every Sunday morning, and during the worship service, he would tell stories. Telling stories, not sermonizing, was his brand. Some colleagues were suspicious. Some scoffed. He's just telling stories, they would say. He's not preaching. 19 years passed. That minister decided he was going to transition into something else, another vocation. A member of the congregation took some of the church newsletters in which the minister had written some of his stories and gave them to a book agent. The book agent read them and called the minister and said, "Do you have any more of these?" And he says, "Yes, I've got a whole bunch of them." The stories were put in the form of a book, and that book stayed on the New York Times bestseller list for just under 2 years. All in all, this minister published 8 books, all of which were in the New York Times bestseller list for a while. Today, more than 17 million copies of his books are in print in 31 languages in 103 countries. It appears to be the case that stories pull on the strings of our heart and mind and soul. One of the stories in that first book is called Mermaids, and it went as follows. Being left in charge of 80 children, 7 to 10 years old, while their parents were off doing parent things, I mustered my troops in the church social hall and explained the game. It's a large-scale version of rock, paper, scissors and involves decision-making, but the real purpose of the game is to make a lot of noise and run around chasing people until nobody knows which side you are on or who won. Organizing a room full of wired-up grade schoolers into 2 teams, explaining the rudiments of the game, achieving consensus of group identity, all this is no mean accomplishment, but we did it with the right goodwill and ready to go. The excitement of the chase had reached a critical mass, and I yelled out, "You have to decide now which you are, a giant, a wizard, or a dwarf." And while the group huddled in frenzied, whispered consultation, a tug came at my pants leg. A small girl stands there looking up and asks me in a small, concerned voice, "Where do the mermaids stand?" A long pause, a very long pause. "Where do the mermaids stand?" asked I. "Yes," she replied. "You see, I am a mermaid." "There are no such things as mermaids." "Oh, yes, I am one." She did not relate to being a giant, a wizard, or a dwarf. She knew her category, mermaid, and was not about to leave the game and go over and stand against the wall where a loser would stand. She intended to participate wherever mermaids fit into the scheme of things, without giving up identity or dignity. She took it for granted that there was a place for the mermaids, and I would know just where. Well, where do mermaids stand? all the mermaids, all those who are different, who do not fit, who do not accept the available boxes and pigeonholes. Answer that question, and you can build a world on it. What was my answer at the moment? Every once in a while, I say the right thing. I said, the mermaid stands here by the king of the sea. Yes, I said to myself, right here by the king's foal. So we stood there, hand in hand, reviewing the troops of wizards and giants and dwarfs as they rolled by in wild disarray. It is not true, by the way, that mermaids do not exist. I know at least one personally, and I have held her hand. Such stories, you might have felt, invite us into their space. They do not coerce. We might identify with one and then another and then yet another of the characters at different times. We are free to draw our own conclusions. Little stories like I just read, or some little stories like the one I read, grounded in the details of everyday life, can be, if we really hear them, like a shaft of light. And they can help us edge down the path of faith development. There are also big stories in addition to little stories. Indeed, every human society has had a big story that tells us how everything began, how things came to be as they are, and where everything is going. These big stories help us know or believe how things came to be, what the mysteries of life and death are, how we can relate to those mysteries. A big story is like the soil out of which our beliefs, customs, and traditions grow. Little stories and big stories are connected, like tiny roots that are connected to a big tree. Big stories influence and give meaning to all the little stories of a culture. The big stories give the big picture. The small stories speak to the infinite details of our lives. Both are needed to nurture what I am calling faith development. Some say that evolution and modern theories about the universe give us a new myth, a new big story. Michael Dowd, I'm sure you're familiar with him, has said, ecology is the new theology. Lewis Thomas, a great essayist and medical doctor, said, our most powerful story, equivalent in a way to a universal myth, is evolution. And Brian Swimme has said, the new cosmic story overwhelms all previous conceptions of the universe for the simple reason that it draws them all into its comprehensive fullness. Well, all of that might be true, but it is most definitely true that big stories and little stories serve an essential role in faith development. Whenever I visited Robert Fulghum, the author of the story I read before, on his houseboat on Lake Washington in the shadow of Seattle, I would read something he wrote years before, placed prominently on the wall, and it was something that he took to every office he ever used, wherever he might go. And I think it summed up what stories, big and little stories, can do for people. The sign on his wall said, "I believe that imagination is stronger than knowledge, that myth is more potent than history, that dreams are more powerful than facts, that hope always triumphs over experience, that laughter is the only cure for grief. And I believe that love is stronger than death." It is our stories, the stories that we come to believe about life, that can lead us to these affirmations. So may it be. And could we return now to Josh at this time? Thank you, Josh. And I wanted to encourage everyone to join me in the breakout room where members of the congregation will share what they learned at a recent leadership conference. As we extinguish our chalice, I will share with you some words from Chiang Sai, a great and revered Chinese teacher and moral philosopher. From 1020 to 1077 he lived, long ago, but his words still resonate today. He wrote, "Heaven is my father, and earth is my mother, and even such a small creature as I find an intimate place in their midst. That which extends throughout the universe, I regard as my body. That which directs the universe, I regard as my nature. All people are my brothers and sisters, and all things are my companions." Amen.